File 19.
Chapter 10. Days and days went by now, and no Satan. It was dull without him. But the astrologer, who had returned from his excursion to the moon, went about the village, braving public opinion, and getting a stone in the middle of his back now and then, when some witch-hater got a safe chance to throw it and dodge out of sight. Meantime, two influences had been working well for Margaret. That Satan, who was quite indifferent to her, had stopped going to her house after a visit or two, had hurt her pride, and she had set herself the task of banishing him from her heart. Reports of Wilhelm Meidling's dissipation, brought to her from time to time by old Ursula, had touched her with remorse, jealousy of Satan being the cause of it. And so now, these two matters working upon her together, she was getting a good profit out of the combination. Her interest in Satan was steadily cooling, her interest in Wilhelm as steadily warming. All that was needed to complete her conversion was that Wilhelm should brace up and do something that should cause favourable talk, and incline the public towards him again. The opportunity came now. Margaret sent and asked him to defend her uncle in the approaching trial, and he was greatly pleased, and stopped drinking and began his preparations with diligence. With more diligence than hope, in fact, for it was not a promising case. He had many interviews in his office with Seppi and me, and thrashed out our testimony pretty thoroughly, thinking to find some valuable grains among the chaff. But the harvest was poor, of course. If Satan would only come, that was my constant thought. He could invent some way to win the case, for he had said it would be won, so he necessarily knew how it could be done. But the days dragged on, and still he did not come. Of course I did not doubt that it would win, and that Father Peter would be happy for the rest of his life, since Satan had said so. Yet I knew I should be much more comfortable if he would come and tell us how to manage it. It was getting high time for Father Peter to have a saving change toward happiness, for by general report he was worn out with his imprisonment and the ignominy that was burdening him, and was likely to die of his miseries unless he got relief soon. At last the trial came on, and the people gathered from all around to witness it, among them many strangers from considerable distances. Yes, everybody was there except the accused. He was too feeble in body for the strain, but Margaret was present, and keeping up her hope and her spirit the best she could. The money was present too. It was emptied on the table, and was handled and caressed and examined by such as were privileged. The astrologer was put in the witness-box. He had on his best hat and robe for the occasion. Question. You claim that this money is yours? I do. How did you come by it? I found the bag in the road when I was returning from a journey. When? More than 2 years ago. What did you do with it? I brought it home and hid it in a secret place in my observatory, intending to find the owner if I could. You endeavoured to find him? I made diligent inquiry during several months, but nothing came of it. And then? I thought it not worth while to look further, and was minded to use the money in finishing the wing of the foundling asylum connected with the priory and the nunnery. So I took it out of its hiding place and counted it to see if any of it was missing. And then— Why do you stop? Proceed. I'm sorry to have to say this, but just as I had finished and was restoring the bag to its place, I looked up, and there stood Father Peter behind me. Several murmured, "Oh, that looks bad," but others answered, "Aye, but he's such a liar." Question. That made you uneasy? No, I thought nothing of it at the time, for Father Peter often came to me unannounced to ask for a little help in his need. Margaret blushed crimson at hearing her uncle falsely and impudently charged with begging, especially from one he had always denounced as a fraud, and was going to speak, but remembered herself in time, and held her peace. Proceed. In the end, I was afraid to contribute the money to the foundling asylum, but elected to wait yet another year and continue my inquiries. When I heard of Father Peter's find, I was glad, and no suspicion entered my mind. When I came home a day or two later and discovered that my own money was gone, I still did not suspect until 3 circumstances connected with Father Peter's good fortune struck me as being singular coincidences. Pray name them. Father Peter had found his money in a path. I had found mine in a road. Father Peter's find consisted exclusively of gold ducats. Mine also. Father Peter found 1,107 ducats. I exactly the same. This closed his evidence, and certainly it made a strong impression on the house. One could see that. Wilhelm Meidling asked him some questions, then called us boys, and we told our tale. It made the people laugh, and we were ashamed. We were feeling pretty badly anyhow, because Wilhelm was hopeless, and showed it. He was doing as well as he could, poor young fellow, but nothing was in his favour, and such sympathy as there was now plainly not with his client. It might be difficult for court and people to believe the astrologer's story, considering his character, but it was almost impossible to believe Father Peter's. We were already feeling badly enough, but when the astrologer's lawyer said he believed he would not ask us any questions, for our story was a little delicate, and it would be cruel for him to put any strain upon it, everybody tittered, and it was almost more than we could bear. Then he made a sarcastic little speech, and got so much fun out of our tale, and it seemed so ridiculous and childish, and every way impossible and foolish, that it made everybody laugh till the tears came. And at last Margaret could not keep up her courage any longer, but broke down and cried, and I was sorry for her. Now I noticed something that braced me up. It was Satan, standing alongside of Wilhelm. And there was such a contrast. Satan looked so confident, had such a spirit in his eyes and face, and Wilhelm looked so depressed and despondent. We too were comfortable now, and judged that he would testify and persuade the bench and the people that black was white and white black, or any other colour he wanted it. We glanced around to see what the strangers in the house thought of him, for he was beautiful, you know, stunning, in fact. But no one was noticing him, so we knew by that he was invisible. The lawyer was saying his last words, And while he was saying them, Satan began to melt into Wilhelm. He melted into him and disappeared. And then there was a change, when his spirit began to look out of Wilhelm's eyes. That lawyer finished quite seriously and with dignity. He pointed to the money and said, "The love of it is the root of all evil. There it lies, the ancient tempter, newly red with the shame of its latest victory, the dishonour of a priest of God and his two poor juvenile helpers in crime. If it could but speak, let us hope that it would be constrained to confess that of all its conquests this was the basest and the most pathetic." He sat down. Wilhelm rose and said, "From the testimony of the accuser, I gather that he found this money in a road more than 2 years ago. Correct me if I misunderstood you." The astrologer said his understanding of it was correct. "And the money so found was never out of his hands thenceforth, up to a certain definite date, the last day of last year. Correct me, sir, if I'm wrong?" The astrologer nodded his head. Wilhelm turned to the bench and said, "If I prove that this money here was not that money, then it is not his."
"Certainly not. But this is irregular. If you had such a witness, it was your duty to give proper notice of it, and to have him here to—"
He broke off, and began to consult with the other judges. Meantime, that other lawyer got up excited, and began to protest against allowing new witnesses to be brought into the case at this late stage. The judges decided that his contention was just, and must be allowed.
"But this is not a new witness," said Wilhelm. "It has already been partly examined."
"I speak of the coin."
"The coin? What can the coin say?"
"It can say that it is not the coin that the astrologer once possessed. It can say that it was not in existence last December. By its date, it can say this." And it was so. There was the greatest excitement in the court, while that lawyer and the judges were reaching for coins and examining them, and exclaiming, and everybody was full of admiration of Wilhelm's brightness in happening to think of that neat idea. At last order was called, and the court said,
"All of the coins but 4 are of the date of the present year. The court tenders its sincere sympathy to the accused, and its deep regret that he, an innocent man, through an unfortunate mistake, has suffered the undeserved humiliation of imprisonment and trial. The case is dismissed."
So the money could speak, after all, though that lawyer thought it couldn't. The court rose, and almost everybody came forward to shake hands with Margit and congratulate her, and then to shake with Wilhelm and praise him. And Satan had stepped out of Wilhelm, and was standing around looking on full of interest, and people walking through him every which way, not knowing he was there. And Wilhelm could not explain why he only thought of the date on the coins at the last moment, instead of earlier. He said it just occurred to him all of a sudden, like an inspiration, and he brought it right out without any hesitation, for although he didn't examine the coins, he seemed somehow to know it was true. That was honest of him, and like him. Another would have pretended that he had thought of it earlier, and was keeping it back for a surprise. He had dulled down a little now. Not much, but still you could notice that he hadn't that luminous look in his eyes that he'd had while Satan was in him. He nearly got it back, though, for a moment, when Marget came and praised and thanked him, and couldn't keep him from seeing how proud she was of him. The astrologer went off dissatisfied and cursing, and Solomon Isaacs gathered up the money and carried it away. It was Father Peter's for good and all.